A child takes one bite of a green vegetable, grimaces, spits it out, and pushes the plate away. The adult sees stubbornness. The child may be experiencing something else entirely. For some children, certain bitter tastes can genuinely feel stronger than they do to adults. But bitterness is only part of the story. A child can reject a food before tasting it, simply because it is unfamiliar. That creates a real trade-off. Accept every unknown food too quickly, and a child may take unnecessary risks. Reject everything unfamiliar, and the child loses nutrients, variety, and the chance to learn what is safe. So when a child says no, is the body detecting danger, or is it delaying a decision because the food has not yet been verified? The first mistake is treating every refusal as the same behavior. A child may reject a familiar vegetable because it tastes too bitter, smells too strong, or feels unpleasant in the mouth. That is a response to a food already experienced. Food neophobia is different. It is reluctance to eat something unfamiliar. The rejection can happen before taste has even entered the picture. From the outside, both reactions look identical. The plate is pushed away. But one refusal may mean, I know this sensation and I dislike it. The other may mean, I do not know what this is yet. That distinction matters because two popular explanations fail almost immediately. Children do not have a perfect instinct for identifying poison, and there is no single gene that decides whether a child will reject vegetables. A better way to understand the evidence is to think of food acceptance as a temporary gate. Strong sensory signals can close it. Unfamiliarity can close it. New information can sometimes open it again. We can't know the exact choices made by any particular prehistoric child. No fossil preserves a grimace. No tool records the moment a child refused a leaf. But we can reconstruct the kind of problem a child may have faced. Consider 3 foods. The first is familiar, but slightly bitter. The second is mild, but completely unfamiliar. The third has never been tasted by the child, but trusted adults are already eating it. The adults may know where each food came from, how it was prepared, and whether other people have eaten it safely. The child does not have that history. The child has immediate sensation, memory, and the behavior of other people. The first test begins with the familiar bitter food. Adults often assume they and the child are tasting the same thing and merely reacting differently. That assumption isn't always right. Studies using standard bitter compounds have found that age and genetic variation can affect bitter perception. In some genetic groups, children detected a standard bitter stimulus at lower concentrations than adults with the same genetic pattern. That doesn't mean every child tastes every vegetable more intensely. It doesn't mean childhood automatically produces stronger bitterness. The result is much narrower. But it shows something important. In some cases, the disagreement begins before discipline or attitude. The sensory input itself may differ. One gene often studied here is TAS2R38, which affects sensitivity to certain bitter compounds such as PTC and PROP. That can sound like a simple answer. Perhaps there is a picky eating gene. There is not. TAS2R38 influences only part of bitter perception. Real foods contain many chemicals, tastes, smells, temperatures, and textures. A response to broccoli, turnip, or another vegetable cannot be reduced to one receptor. Research on repeated vegetable exposure also shows that genetic sensitivity does not permanently lock behavior in place. Children with different bitter profiles can still change their acceptance over time. Genes may change the strength of one input, they do not write the entire decision. But if bitterness can feel stronger, perhaps bitter taste is still a reliable warning that something is poisonous. That explanation is attractive because some harmful compounds are bitter. Rejecting them could clearly be useful. The problem is, bitterness and toxicity don't line up neatly. Some bitter compounds are harmful. Some bitter foods are safe. Some dangerous substances aren't strongly bitter. Research comparing bitter and toxic compounds finds some overlap, but not a one-to-one relationship. Animal studies also fail to show a stable rule in which stronger bitterness reliably means greater toxicity. So, bitterness carries information, but it is an imperfect signal. It can give correct warnings, it can also give false alarms, and it can miss dangers that don't announce themselves through bitterness. That changes the question. A child's bitter response isn't a chemical test that tells you the truth about a food. It is more like an alarm with a relatively low threshold. Why would a system tolerate so many false alarms? One possible explanation is that the two kinds of mistakes don't cost the same. Rejecting one safe food may mean losing a meal opportunity. Accepting a genuinely harmful unknown substance may carry a much larger cost. In that kind of environment, delaying acceptance could sometimes be safer than treating every new item as edible. But the threshold can't stay permanently closed. A child who rejects too many foods loses calories, nutrients, dietary variety, and knowledge about local resources. The useful response may not be, "This is dangerous forever." It may be, "Do not accept this yet." That brings us to the second food. It is mild. It is not obviously bitter. The child still hesitates before putting it in the mouth. Taste cannot explain a refusal that happens before tasting. This is where food neophobia matters. The food is being rejected not because the child has tasted it, but because it hasn't yet become familiar. Twin research suggests that differences in food neophobia reflect both genetic and environmental influences. That rules out two opposite stories. Parenting doesn't create the reaction all by itself. And it isn't a fixed instinct that experience can't change. Children can start with different thresholds, while family environment, repeated experience, and individual learning keep shaping them. Even the word genetic can be misleading. A heritability estimate describes differences across a population under particular conditions. It doesn't mean a fixed percentage of one child's behavior is written into DNA. The useful question is not whether nature or nurture wins. It is what kind of information changes the gate. An unfamiliar food leaves at least three separate questions. What does it look like? What does it actually taste and feel like? What happens after I, or someone else, eats it? Those questions can't all be answered by the same kind of exposure. A classic experiment compared children who repeatedly looked at unfamiliar fruits with children who repeatedly tasted them. Looking made the fruits look more familiar, but that visual familiarity didn't reliably make the children accept the taste. Actually, tasting the fruit gave them information that looking couldn't. A child can learn that a food no longer looks strange while still knowing nothing about its flavor, texture, or what happens after swallowing it. One lock may open while the others stay closed. Direct experience adds another piece of evidence. In a study involving repeated exposure to turnip, average intake and liking increased over repeated tastings. Some improvement was still visible later. But that doesn't give us a universal formula. It doesn't mean every child will accept every food after a fixed number of tries. It doesn't mean there's a magic number of bites. It means that, under controlled conditions, repeated direct experience can change acceptance. The first reaction isn't always the final judgment. This also shows why genetic sensitivity and learning aren't competing explanations. A child may begin with a stronger, bitter signal and still update expectations through experience. The gate can start at a different threshold without staying permanently locked. Trying the food yourself isn't the only source of information. Now consider the third food, one the child has not tasted, but trusted adults are eating. Children don't copy every action they see. The details matter. In one experiment, young children were more willing to accept a novel food when an adult ate food matching the one offered to them than when the adult merely sat nearby or ate something different. The social cue was specific. An adult is eating was less informative than an adult is eating this. Unquote. That makes sense. Someone else's experience only helps if it seems relevant to the choice in front of the child. Research with younger infants suggests this selective use of food information starts early. In lab experiments, infants combined an adult's eating action with information about what kind of object it was. They didn't respond as if every object placed near a mouth automatically became food. Other experiments found that infants delayed touching plants compared with unfamiliar artificial objects. Those findings are interesting, but there are clear limits. Touching a plant later isn't the same as refusing food. A lab response isn't proof of a prehistoric survival adaptation. Controlled experiments can't recreate the full range of experience in real communities. The experiments show early selective behavior. They don't tell us exactly why that behavior evolved. And bitterness and unfamiliarity still can't explain every refusal. Odor matters. Texture matters. General sensory sensitivity matters. A child who is cautious around new toys, people, and places may also approach new foods cautiously. A previous episode of vomiting, choking, pain, or forced feeding can create an aversion to a familiar food. Sometimes the food really does smell stronger or feel worse to the child. Sometimes the main problem is not taste at all. That's why the same outward action can't tell us the exact cause. Two children can push away the same meal for completely different reasons. One may find the bitter signal intense, one may dislike the texture. One may be uncertain because the food is new. Another may remember a previous unpleasant experience. The evidence gets even thinner when we look deep into the past. Ancient DNA from one Neanderthal at El Sidron showed variation in the TAS 2R38 region. That suggests related differences in bitter perception have a deep history, but the finding tells us much less than people may want it to. It comes from one individual and limited genetic information. It can't tell us the person's age, full taste experience, favorite foods, or behavior, and it certainly can't tell us how Neanderthal children reacted at a meal. Ancient DNA can show that the variation is old. It can't turn that variation into a recorded prehistoric scene. Ancient doesn't mean we know what it did. Now return to the three foods. The familiar bitter food still produces a strong sensory response. Familiarity alone doesn't erase a taste that still feels intense. The unfamiliar mild fruit looks less strange after repeated encounters, but the child still doesn't know the taste or the outcome. A tiny taste adds something new. The flavor is experienced. Nothing immediately bad happens. The prediction can start to change. The third food is already being eaten by trusted people. Their behavior lowers uncertainty because they are eating the same thing. But social evidence doesn't cancel the child's own sensory experience. The child may still accept, hesitate, or refuse. Three foods, three different information problems, three different possible outcomes. Here's the bigger point. Children may not be putting a permanent poison label on rejected food. They may be delaying acceptance while parts of that prediction are still unresolved. One process responds to strong sensory signals such as bitterness, odor, and texture. Another responds to unfamiliarity before taste occurs. A third process updates the prediction through direct experience, the absence of negative consequences, and specific social information. Thinking of this as a temporary acceptance gate is a useful way to organize the evidence. It isn't a single brain structure scientists have discovered. It's a model for how several supported processes can work together. The gate can protect. It can also misfire. A low threshold may prevent some risky tries, while also rejecting safe vegetables, fruits, and unfamiliar dishes. A child may inherit a stronger sensitivity, learn caution through experience, and later revise part of that judgment. None of these processes guarantees the right answer. Back at the modern table, the original refusal no longer has one obvious explanation. The food may be familiar, but a particular bitter, odor, or texture signal may still be strong. The food may be mild, but it still hasn't been verified through direct experience. A previous bad experience may be driving the reaction. The adult's reassurance may also be answering the wrong question. Saying, "This is healthy," gives nutrition information, but it doesn't provide the missing sensory evidence. So why do children reject bitter and unfamiliar foods? Some children are genuinely more sensitive to certain bitter signals. Unfamiliar foods can trigger a separate pause before tasting. Both responses are shaped by biology, sensory experience, family environment, and what children learn from other people. But bitterness isn't a reliable label for poison. TAS2R38 isn't a picky eating gene, and not every rejected food is an ancient survival adaptation. The best answer is that a child may not be rejecting the food itself as permanently dangerous. The child may be rejecting an unverified prediction about that food. What will it taste like? What will it feel like? What happens after eating it? Are the people eating it actually eating the same thing? Until enough of those questions are answered, the gate may stay closed. That system can protect a child, and it can reject perfectly safe food. It can be influenced by biology without being fixed by biology. It can change through experience without changing on command. Modern research can explain parts of how that judgment works. It can't tell us what one prehistoric child tasted, feared, or accepted. What it does show is more useful than the myth of a perfect instinct. Children don't carry a flawless detector for safe and dangerous food. They carry a cautious, imperfect, updatable system for deciding when a bitter or unfamiliar food is ready to be accepted.